Hello everyone, it's Merlin here, and today we are going to be discussing an anime villain who is one of my personal favorites and someone who I've been requested to discuss some time ago, and I'm finally getting around to it now, and that would be Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. Now, it's really interesting because Hisoka is something of a rarity in anime villains, I think, or really just villains in general, because he's a very successful villain. He's very popular among fans of the Hunter x Hunter series, but not for the reasons that are typical for the popularity of most villains. In most series, for more sophisticated villains, popularity is usually derived from either presence during certain actions or a really strong motivation and background carried through their personality. And the thing about Hisoka is, we don't know that much about him. We know very, very little about his origins or why he is the way he is. All we really know about him is that he was very poor when he grew up, and his only real comfort was a form of bubblegum. That's really it. That's pretty much all we know about his early life. And that leaves a lot open to interpretation about why he became the homicidal maniac that he is, how he learned to become adept at his nen abilities. We don't know how he ended up joining up with the Phantom Troop. We know virtually nothing about him. All we know about Hisoka is that he is a homicidal maniac, but he is able to rein in his insanity and think things out methodically. He can take his time and he can manipulate everybody to find the absolute best end result for him. We first meet Hisoka in the Hunter exam when the four main characters are essentially going through the exam. We see Hisoka as really the first main antagonist of the series, and arguably the most prominent one since then. He goes on a murderous rampage several times, and really cuts down the competition, which really brings into the whole question the morality of the Hunter exam in the sense that even though Hisoka had actually killed somebody in a previous exam, he was allowed to take it again. So it is interesting to note that skill is the only real factor when attempting to get your Hunter license, not a criminal background, which you'd think would be important. But Togashi's very flimsy in the world of Hunter x Hunter, especially when it comes to morality. But in any case, Hisoka's relationship with Gon is probably one of the most interesting aspects of his character. He sees Gon has great potential as a fighter, and in a sense, Hisoka does have that stereotypical shonen aspect where the villain really just lives to take down a certain character because they're a really good fighter and wants to see them taken down at their highest potential. And even though that is interesting, it is something that we've seen in the past and still continue to see. It's kind of a stereotypical shonen aspect. Hisoka really loves to take down the competition, and he literally gets an almost orgasmic sensation from it. He gets sexually aroused when he's brutally murdering somebody. And the more of a challenge it is, the more pleasurable it is for him, and that is the primary driving aspect of Hisoka. And he sees Gon, as well as Killua and Kurapika to an extent, as being challenges, which is why even though he has the opportunity throughout the Hunter exam and later on, even when he's joining up with the Phantom Troop once again, to take them down, as far as we can tell, his primary goal is to use them, help them grow, become better fighters, become more adept with their nen abilities and their other skills, so that when he's ready, he can take down Gon especially, and derive the ultimate amount of pleasure he possibly can from it. That's basically what Hisoka's primary motivation is. It's very generic in its basis, but the execution is very different. You don't usually see that weird, psychopathic, and rather perverted nature to a shonen battle. Just not something we see too much. And early on, Hisoka was really, really essential to Gon's development because he presented the first real challenge for Gon, and he also presented a real clear tension and fear from him because he was an extremely dangerous foe that Gon had to be pitted up against, particularly in the one section of the exam where everyone has to try and attempt to get those badges which have certain points attributed to them, and Gon is pitted up against Hisoka. That is probably the first significant portion of Gon's growth because in that moment, Hisoka manages to defeat Gon, clearly has him outmatched, basically cripples him. In that moment, Hisoka explains to Gon that his life is basically in his hands, and he gives him his badge, and basically allows him to proceed in the test. So his success as a hunter, and his life in general, at that point, was Hisoka's. And that put an incredible strain on Gon's psyche, because Gon is obviously about being his own person and making his own accomplishments. Being a hunter is very important to him, not only just due to the general challenge, but also his ultimate journey to find his father, and just to grow as a person. So to find that his success as a hunter, and ultimately his life, is in the hands of this horrible, horrible person. And it is this event that primarily leads to Gon facing Hisoka much later, and even though Gon is defeated by Hisoka, Hisoka set up the stipulation that he would cut off that debt if Gon would demonstrate the ability that he could land a blow on Hisoka. And this was such an incredible amount of motivation for Gon that he does far more than land a single blow. He gives Hisoka a really, really good fight. And it's probably one of the few times in a shonen battle series that I can think of where even though the main protagonist loses the fight, it has so much context behind it, more so than many of the fights I can think of in many of the series. At least when the main protagonist loses it. That's something very unique. And this also provides an interesting aspect to Hisoka's character because even though one could argue that he is trying to help Gon grow to fulfill his own personal needs, it is somewhat unclear because Hisoka has such a fascination for Gon. It does make the audience wonder if it's a possibility he might actually be trying to help him for some other reason, perhaps not as selfish a one. This is truly one of the most bizarre things about Hisoka is the fact that we know that he's evil. We know that he's a psychopath. We know that he's a terrible person who's done terrible things. We're not entirely sure if his motivations are completely evil. And this is primarily due to his personality and the way he carries himself. There's just so much kept in secret, which is one of the great advantages to Togashi's writing of the character. He reveals just enough to keep us intrigued, but still leaves a lot to be discovered. However, Hisoka would also continue to help Gon and Killua later in Greed Island, and appears to be doing so thus far. Another example of the complexity behind Hisoka's possible motivations is his aiding of Kurapika. When we find out that Hisoka was a member of the Phantom Troop, we at first believe that he is perhaps loyal to the group, but then we learn that this is the furthest thing from the truth. He reveals some information to Kurapika about the Phantom Troop, putting his teammates in danger, people that supposedly he had a great deal of loyalty to and a lot of history with, solely so he could have the opportunity to fight Chrollo and defeat him. Knowing how powerful of a foe Chrollo would be, he would obviously derive a great deal of pleasure from the challenge of defeating and killing one of the most powerful opponents he possibly could have ever known. And it is also the intriguing amount of manipulation that Hisoka has to the situation around him, that he's able to pit the Phantom Troop against Gon and his friends, and still have it work out to his advantage, that he still has the possibility to take out Chrollo as well as to keep Gon developing so that he could ultimately defeat him or possibly kill him. Once again, there's just so much open in the air about Hisoka that it's just interesting. Even though it's almost certain that his motivations are evil and he does mean to kill Gon, he does mean to use him purely for his own personal reasons, it always seems like there's something else going on with Hisoka that we're just uncertain about. And I believe it's that uncertainty, as well as his somewhat disturbing presence and the stylistic nature of his personality that really intrigues the audience. And though Hunter x Hunter is still ongoing and obviously far from being done at the time of this video, I still think that Hisoka does have a significant part to play, but really time will only tell. For me, Hisoka is a really awesome villain. I do like those psychopathic villains who kind of are behind the scenes and have their own personal motivations. Despite the fact that Hisoka certainly does have his over-the-top moments, on the whole he does have that subtlety to him, this strange, mysterious presence. And I think it's that sense of mystery and the fact that we don't completely understand his motivations, as well as the fact that he does have a lot of skill as a fighter, as a strategist, that just makes him so intriguing. And I also think his design is very unique as well. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear why Hisoka is honestly one of the greatest things about Hunter x Hunter. I think that if you asked most people, he's easily the best thing about the series, which, once again, is one of the things that makes him very unique as a villain. For a villain to be arguably the most interesting aspect of a series, even though we know next to nothing about him, I think that really says something to the delivery of this character. Well guys, that's really all I have to say about Hisoka at the moment. So I'm going to leave the questions for you. You can leave them in the comment section below. Do you guys like Hisoka? Do you not like Hisoka? What are the aspects of the character that you guys think is so interesting and intriguing that makes him such a popular character for the series? And what part do you think he has to play in events that will unfold in the future in Hunter x Hunter? Alright guys, that's all I have to say right now. This is Merlin with another character discussion, and there'll be many more in the future. Alright guys, peace.